All right, guys, the time has come. The worm bin is getting full, the garden is starving, and I've got potting soil to make. So, welcome to the Nichols Family Homestead. Today, I'm going to take you through my worm composting process, and we're going to harvest from our bins. So I'm going to take you along as we go through and we harvest from the big bin, as we harvest from the flow-through bin, and as we go ahead and sift these castings and get them ready to go in the garden. So join me in this process, and I hope you learned something from it. All right, so this is my horizontal flow worm bin. Now, you'll come to realize that when it comes to worm castings, there are really two types of bins. There's what's called a horizontal flow, and there's what's called a vertical flow. And all that means is that what side you, or where you feed the worms and where they come out at. So a horizontal flow, or a wedge system I've heard it called, you basically start on one end of the bin, and then you feed it, and you move the castings to the other side of the bin. And in a horizontal flow, you put the food on top, the worms eat it, it sinks down, you harvest from the bottom. And I've got both systems here. So I'm going to show you first how we harvest from our horizontal flow. First things first, I'm going to go ahead and remove my white t-shirt. So I put this in just to make sure that the castings stay moist on this side of the bin. So let's go ahead and put my gloves on. I don't always wear gloves, but it's helpful. Now this side of the bin here is where I feed all of my worms. And as I feed them here, I go through this bin and slowly move these castings this way. And then I want this side drier, because one of the biggest issues I see people have when it comes to worm farming is how do you get the castings out of the container and sift them? And how do you make sure you don't have any worms in your castings? You don't want to lose your guys that are composting all of this material and making this beautiful black gold right here. This is the good stuff right here. What I'm going to do here is start by simply scooping out some of these finished castings. Now you'll see there's sticks, there's clumps, all of that stuff. At this point in the process, that's absolutely fine. We'll deal with it in the future. So all I'm gonna do is take my bucket and scoop some castings. So I need to get about 5 gallons worth of castings today, because I am going to be making my own potting mix, and I need about 5 gallons of castings. So hopefully we can harvest at least close to that amount out of here. Now, every bin's gonna have issues, plastic, stuff like that. As I see bigger pieces of plastic or things like that, I'll go ahead and remove them and throw them in the trash can. And I'm also watching for the moisture level here. Basically, I want it moist where it clumps up together, but I want it to break apart as I move it through my fingers. And that means it's gonna sift really well. It's still moist enough for all that microbiological life, but the worms will avoid it or have moved. And as you see, as I'm getting into this bin, I'm not getting any worms. And that's because they're all over here where I feed them. Over here is basically just my drying area. So I'm gonna scoop until I can get either the moisture's too wet or I start running into worms. So a lot of people don't realize how beneficial this stuff is. So this right here, it's basically worm poop or worm castings, and it is full of microbiological life. Now I know you've heard of using chicken poop or rabbit poop or anything like that for planting your plants in, and that's because those are also full of vitamins and minerals and stuff that your plant needs. But worm castings are a little different, because in these, if you've ever heard of the term living soil, basically what's going on is there's tons of this microbiological life, this real tiny stuff that you can't see to the naked eye, but it is under in the worm's guts. So as they eat and process food, that passes through them, and then this stuff is amazing for the garden. I know a lot of folks, especially people who do organic gardening, who do not use any fertilizers whatsoever. They use this stuff right here because what that microbiological life does is it goes in and it breaks down the nutrients that are already in the soil, making them available for the plants. But this is technically not fertilizer. Anybody who calls it fertilizer is either misinformed or lying to you because there isn't a big NPK rating in this. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and I don't remember the third one. So let me know in the comments if you remember. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and something else. And I don't think it actually starts with a K. It's just confusing. But, so I've gotten to the bottom of this bin here. Make sure I'm not getting any worms. So I've got about 5 gallons here, and obviously not all of this is going to make it into my harvest because I have to sift through it. But I think I've got a good starting point. I'm going to move on to the next step. So you see I've got this big hole right here in my worm castings. So what I'm going to do is basically move everything down just a little bit. But I'm also going to come out here and just fluff this. So you end up with spots where this moisture has really gotten this stuff sticking together. And that's what we're trying to make sure doesn't happen. So we're going to come through and break up all these big chunks and get some oxygen further down into these castings. I got to be careful doing this because I had shoulder surgery about 3 weeks ago, and my physical therapist told me this week, hey, just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should. And I should not be lifting heavy materials. And obviously with this full of water, it can get pretty heavy. So really all I'm doing is digging down. If I find big pieces, so this is the elastic from a white cotton t-shirt that I was using to keep the soil moist. Obviously the worms went through and ate all the cotton, which is good, but let's move that elastic out of there. And we're just gonna keep digging. Keep breaking up and adding oxygen to this so it doesn't become anaerobic. Now, what's interesting about this is it doesn't stink. A lot of people think, oh, my worm, this is, if I get a worm bin or something like that, it's gonna stink, but it smells like dirt. That's all it is it just smells like dirt. If it starts to stink, that means it's either too wet, it doesn't have enough oxygen, or it's not being broken down. So maybe you overfed, maybe you gave them too much water. So what is this? So this is a big piece of bark, so I'm gonna just throw that over there. Now, it does take them a while to break down like sticks and stuff like that, even though it does eventually break down. And I'll show you, once I get to sifting, what I do. There's another piece of shirt. There's a little seashell. I have no idea how a seashell ended up in my castings, but that's pretty cool. But yeah, just kind of go in and mix all this stuff up. So I do eventually plan on selling these castings locally because there's a good market for them, and honestly, they're great. For gardeners, for homesteaders, and honestly, I think worms are probably the most important animal on the homestead because they do an amazing job of taking your organic material, your chicken manure, which is what I use a lot of times, after it's been pre-composted and broken down. I don't add it straight to the bin. But taking all that material and turning it into this beautiful black gold. I never did understand that term. Like, I've heard people use the term black gold a lot for a bunch of different things. I've heard it used for compost. I've heard it used for worm castings. Of course, now that I'm talking about it, I'm not going to remember what else I've heard it used for, but it seems to be an overused term to me. But when I talk about it, I'm talking about worm castings. By the way, if you ever play around in the soil or you garden, get you a pair of these gloves. These have this plastic piece on the end right here that allows you to dig, and absolutely makes things so much easier. So as you see, as I am moving this stuff over and down, I'm getting bigger and bigger pieces. That's because the worms haven't finished breaking this material down. So as I get towards the middle of the bin, oh, I just lost him. I just had a worm I was going to show you. But as I get towards the middle of the bin, you'll see that, there we go. So here are my worms. And I know most people who do worm videos tell you how many worms are in their castings or in their bins. I have no idea. What's nice about worms is they self-regulate. So if there's not enough food, it's not a hospitable living condition, there's too many worms, they will actually decrease laying eggs. If there's an abundance of food and they're in a great situation, they will increase the amount of eggs they lay. And I've heard it said in like optimal conditions, you can get the population to double every 3 months. Right now in South Carolina, it's not exactly optimal conditions. They like it closer to 70 degrees or so, which today it's great, but it takes time for it to warm up. So this is a good example of why I come through and fluff. So if you look, this casting is already clumped and it's compacted. So, I mean, it breaks apart like it needs to, but this would not be good to try and sift. It would be a real pain in the butt to try and sift this material. There's another worm right there. Yeah, I don't know how well the camera can see that, but so yeah, eventually I plan on selling these locally at the farmer's market, but right now I'm just using them myself and basically practicing making these things. By the way, if you're interested in seeing our feeding system and how we feed these guys, let me know. That's probably another good video. All right, so this is cocoa core bedding. It's basically was a mat that I was using to hold in moisture, and obviously the worms ate it, which is good. So I'll just throw that back over there to where they're still eating. Yeah, and as I continue to move this direction, I'm going to end up with more and more worms and bigger pieces. So, get you another look at those guys right there. So they do not like the light, so they're kind of trying to dive down to avoid the light. I'm not sure how well the camera's picking up these little guys. But they'll actually migrate to where the food is. So even if I throw them over here where it's drier, they'll slowly move back this direction. And hopefully, as I get over here, I'll be able to show you a big worm ball. So these guys like to congregate, basically, and hang out and breed and all that good stuff. So just quite a few in there. I wouldn't call it a worm ball though. This is just kind of them getting through the cocoa core. Yeah, hopefully you can see I'm getting much more worms over here. Every scoop I'm getting now has a handful of them. And these guys are just going through, eating, pooping, and making more babies, and making this compost, or this vermicast, or vermicompost, or worm castings, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different names for things. Yeah, it's getting really moist on this end, which is good. I want my moist stuff on this side. I want my harvest and dry stuff on this side. And this tote is just a, I don't know, 30 or 50 gallon tote from Walmart. Hopefully it doesn't break on me. I've had it for about 6 months, but you can see it bows on the sides. So eventually, I'm gonna take an old refrigerator that I got when I replaced when I put a new one in here. I'm gonna take the old one and turn that into what's called a horizontal flow system, which is this one. And yeah, that would hopefully have the sturdiness to not to bow out. So let's keep digging through these guys, pulling out the stuff that shouldn't be in here, as we see big pieces of plastic and things like that. I mean, it happens. The reality is, like, we use a lot of shredded cardboard and shredded newspaper and envelopes. Well, if they've got that little plastic screen on the envelope, sometimes it makes it into the bin. Now, I try to avoid putting those through the shredder, but the reality is nobody's perfect, and some stuff slips through. Oh yeah, we're starting to get into worm territory here. I don't know, again, how well you can pick up these worms, but they're all moving through there. You can see here, this is a chunk of cardboard bedding and food that they're working on. So kind of break that up a little bit. The other reason I kind of go through and fluff all this up is, so I started with, it was either African or European night crawlers. And they tend to grab their food and take it further down into the pile, a little bit more than these regular red wigglers do. These red wigglers only want to eat in the top couple of inches of the soil. So part of me kind of digging through and fluffing this up is if there's any food in the bottom here that they have not dug down to get, I am redistributing it to the top. So you can see here, this stuff is not broken down at all. And it's super wet, so I bet we'll get a big chunk of worms coming through. Actually, there's not many. I'm just trying to break up some of these bigger clumps. And now this is just food. This is pre-composted leaves, cardboard, bedding, that kind of thing. But I'm just kind of digging digging it out so that we can get a little air to it so it doesn't get the anaerobic and smell. I mentioned in my last video the number of uses for cardboard on the homestead, and this is one of my favorites. So these guys will come through and break down all this bedding, all these leaves, all this cardboard, and turn it into really nice soil. So if it is something that you think I should make a video on, all the uses for cardboard in the on the farm or on the homestead, let me know and I will make that video. I'll probably make it anyway, to be honest with you. I just need y'all to comment down in the bottom to grow this channel and support this video. This is probably the second or third video on this channel. So likes, comments, subscribes, always helpful. Thank you. Ugh. All right, so I've gone through and I've fluffed this up pretty good. So I'm seeing a lot of bedding still, and I'm seeing a lot of food. So I don't think I'm gonna feed them right now. I will add more bedding to this pile, but I'm not gonna feed them just yet. So got my 55-gallon barrel here of shredded cardboard and paper that probably needs to be filled up again, and we will get some of that loaded in there. And I don't want to fill it up just yet, and I'll show you why here in just a second. So just putting a layer of bedding in there, and they will eat this stuff and break it down as well. And I'll leave it in there dry for now. And so I'm gonna leave this open, but I'm gonna move on to my horizontal flow bin. So I'm gonna move on to my vertical flow bin. Never confuse horizontal and vertical, it's whatever. So just did the horizontal, now I'm gonna do the vertical, and I'm gonna show you one of the biggest issues people have with a vertical flow bin system, whether that's the vermi hut, whether that's the urban worm bag, whether that's the hungry bin, which is the one I'm about to dig in. All of these, or whether you built it out of buckets. I've seen folks do really nice systems with 5-gallon buckets stacked on top of each other. But I'm gonna show you the number one issue folks have with these vertical flow systems. All right, so this is my hungry bin. And as much as I love this thing, it's not cheap. It's a couple $100. And it does have a few problems, but it is sturdy, it is on wheels. And the way this one works is you feed from the top and you collect from the bottom. Ooh, look at all these worms on the lid here. I wonder if you can see that. No, you can't. So yeah, this one's got a bunch of worms sitting on the lid, which is fine. They're just attracted to the moisture up there. But like I said, the way this one works is you feed it from the top and you collect from the bottom. So on the bottom here, there are 2 little plastic clips on each side. And when I take that off, this is going to basically come out of the bottom. And hopefully the way this is supposed to work is that the gravity will pull all this down and compact it. And it'll keep everything from falling out of the bottom, which it usually works. I haven't had any issues where the entire thing falls out of the bottom. But we'll go ahead and take this off. Well, I'm a half liar. A bunch of it just fell out of the bottom. Not all of it, but a good bit. So I'm gonna have to pick that up. But one of the things you'll notice about this right here, and the biggest issue folks have with these vertical flow systems is this is super wet. And honestly, this is better than the ones I've had in the past, where it is just extremely wet. And there's no way, even though these castings are finished, there's no way I could run this through a sifter and get good castings out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all of these castings and I'm gonna add them to that horizontal flow bin that you saw earlier. So let's take you back over to the horizontal flow bin. So if you remember, the way I said I take care of my extremely wet castings is that, this side is my dry side and this side is my wet side. So all I'm gonna do is take these really wet castings and dump them into my wet side. And then as I move stuff over, these are gonna dry out and these are gonna be moist. So I'm gonna take what I got out of my hungry bin, I'm gonna dump it right into this side of the bin. And yeah, you can see how wet that is there at the bottom. There's no way that I'd be able to sift that out and give that to a customer. Or, I guess I could use it in my garden, but I'd much rather let it dry out a little bit so that I can put it in some Ziploc bags or something like that and give it to customers. So before I put this back, I had a bunch fall out of the bottom. So I'm gonna have to, I guess I'll clip this back on and then I'll have to grab a whole bunch of the stuff that fell out of the bottom and put it into my horizontal flow system. I'm actually really surprised the worms are not over, or the worms. I'm actually really surprised the chickens aren't over here, because anytime I start digging around in this worm bin, the chickens go absolutely nuts trying to get worms that have escaped. And you'll see there's a little bit of dirt in there. It's fine. They're worms. You're not gonna hurt them with dirt. I think I got most of it. I'm not gonna be able to get it all, so the chickens are gonna get a nice little treat next time they come in here. Basically what I've done so far is I've shown you one of the issues with the vertical flow systems. If you get one, sometimes they don't compact well enough and all the stuff kind of dumps out of the bottom. You don't lose all of it, but you do lose some. As well as the bottom being super moist. And if that happens, it makes it really tough to get it, to sift it. So what we do is we take from our horizontal flow system, we take from our vertical flow system and move it to our horizontal flow system and then slowly move it down to the end. So it's a bit of a process, but it's absolutely worth it. Next, we're gonna get into how we sift our castings, and I'll show you what we do with those. All right, so this is my rolling sifter. Basically, you put the castings in and you spin it. So you don't have to use a rolling sifter like this. I spent a little bit more money because I was finding myself spending a lot of time sifting castings. But you can honestly buy these cheap, I shouldn't say cheap, these inexpensive sifters right here that sit over top of a 5-gallon bucket and shake it back and forth. I just decided I wanted to use this. So this thing right here will actually sit over top of your standard wheelbarrow or anything like that. So all of my castings I actually sift twice, and I don't have to do that, but I like to for a couple of reasons that I'll explain to you in just a second. But let's get these 5 gallons of castings that I've already harvested and get them sifted. So I just unscrew the end here, get my little scoop, try not to spill too much. So I don't want to dump the full 5 gallons in there because it tends to get stuck. So I just kind of dump a little bit in there. Since that scoop is spilling, I'm going to use a mason jar to start scooping out the castings. Actually, I think I might be better off just using my hands. Yeah, that's a lot better. All right, so that's enough to kind of show you what I'm doing. I don't think you want to watch the whole sifting process, but I'll go ahead and get some of those in there. And all this is going to do is move out a lot of the bigger pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of this 5 gallons, and then I will show you what I do next. I have gotten all 5 gallons of that worm composting, or the vermicompost, sifted. And this is the sifted materials. So as you can see, it's not everything. It's, still got some bigger chunks in there, and that is why we're gonna sift it for a second time. As I was doing this though, honestly, using that big sifter is great, but I actually think it might be better for me to use the less expensive sifters that I showed you just a second ago. I have another smaller version of that big sifter, and these have very small holes through it, and the objective of these is to catch any worm eggs or anything like that from falling through. I want to catch all of my baby worms, and I want to keep all of them. But I actually think it might be easier if I actually use the 5-gallon green sifters to load and shake it through. So I will show you that. So I'll show you this as well. This right here is all the big stuff that I got out of the sifting. And you'll notice there's some bits of plastic. What I'm going to do, that looks like it used to be part of a credit card. So I'm going to go through this and clear out some of the plastic and stuff like that. But then all the big sticks and all of that stuff is just going to go back into the top through the system of my vertical flow system. So basically it's going to go back through from the top to the bottom of that system. Then it's going to go to the horizontal flow system. And that just gives all of this stuff more time to break down. Okay, so next I'm going to show you what is essentially the last part of the process. It's going to be the second sifting. Now, normally what I would do is I would take the 1/4-inch sifted castings that I've already done, stick them over in this tote right here, cover them with some moisture material to keep them wet, and then not sift until I need those castings. That being said, I mentioned that this weekend I'm going to be creating my own potting soil, so I do need to go ahead and get these sifted. Now, there's nothing wrong with the 1/4-inch ones. They could go directly into the garden, but there's a lot of still bigger pieces and sticks and stuff like that in there that I just didn't really want to put into my potting soil where I'm going to plant my blackberries. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this process of sifting out the last little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to show you it catching some worms and some of the eggs that might fall through that bigger sifter. So this is I think it's the 1/16 of an inch one. Let's see what it says on the sticker. No, I'd have to look it up. Pretty sure it's the 1/16 of an inch one, but basically it's the smallest one I have. So all I'm going to do is put this over top of the bucket, get my trusty scooper, scoop it in, and then shake this. And I gotta be careful doing this. I don't want to use my left hand too much because I mentioned I had that shoulder surgery. But let's go ahead and sift all of this. So it takes a little work, takes a little time, which is fine. That's also why you don't want to make really big uh, scoops into this, because it makes it take longer. So I'm just kind of combing through to see if I find any pieces of plastic, and also potentially show you. So I'm not sure how much entertainment value you're going to get out of watching me shake this bucket back and forth for the next half hour to 45 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end, and if there's anything that interesting happens while I'll keep the camera running. If anything interesting happens, I'll pause it and show you that. All right, and at the end, this is what I'm left with. Now, it's not a true full 5 gallons. It looks like I got about 40% of the initial 5 gallons after I've sifted it all the way through. I did find that using the plastic 5-gallon bucket ones tended to go a little bit easier, especially because I was able to stack them on top of each other. So I'll show you that real quick, because I found like it was easier. So I just kind of stacked them in order of smallest to biggest. Like so. Put the stuff on, actually you can't see it. So I kind of stacked them smallest to biggest like so. And put the stuff in on top, sifted it down, took the bigger stuff off, sifted this down, took the bigger stuff off, sifted it down. And I actually, with this, I actually didn't let everything fall through. I went ahead and dumped what was in this into the bucket because it's sifted down small enough. I just used this one to go through and see if I had any like eggs or worms or anything like that in here. And then I just dumped it into the bucket. So at the end, this right here, this right here is what all of it was for. These beautiful, soft, fluffy castings that are gonna go into the garden. They're great at moisture retention. They're alive with microbiology and nutrients for my plants. So I am super excited to get these into the garden. And the next thing I'm gonna do is we are going to make these into our own potting soil. So I'm gonna do that video next, but before I get on that video, I have to get the rest of this 5-gallon bucket filled. So I'm gonna have to repeat this whole process. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. If you're interested in watching me use this and making my own potting soil to plant my blackberries in pots, go ahead and subscribe and watch the next video. My name is Sean with the Nichols Family Farmstead, and I look forward to talking to you soon.